Start late, so we're going to get this show on the road. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for May 16th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that everybody mute your cell phones and other electronic devices. And I'll ask Rob to do a roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Trustee Dahlman?
Here.
Trustee Albinson?
Here.
Trustee Handler?
Here.
Trustee Orsick?
Here.
President Prince?
Here. Okay, second item is Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Trustee Dahlman to lead us this evening.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, quorum check. Rob, would you like to do a quorum check, please?
Yes, thank you. We're looking at the June meetings, the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th. Any conflicts? The 6th, okay. You good? Okay, this side? You're good, Kim? Okay. Everything else looked okay on this side for June? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, item 4 is public comment. This is the time of the evening when anyone in the audience may address the Village Council on items that are not included on the agenda. So if you're here on one of the items that we're contemplating deliberating on later in the evening, this is not the time for you to talk, but it's open mic for anything else. So you're welcome to come on up and share your thoughts if you'd like to. Come on up, Jeff. 3 minutes.
Jeffrey Liss, 640 Winnetka Muse, Winnetka. Summer's approaching and villages start thinking about what they're going to be doing. And remembering that villages are probably our civic leaders, I thought I would like to just remind the council not to repeat the mistakes of other villages and simply to remember that the holiday we celebrate in July is Independence Day. It is not the 4th day of July. So all our brochures, all our banners should always say Happy Independence Day, not Happy 4th of July. So just sometimes that gets lost and nobody thinking clearly about it, so I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll see you at the 4th of July parade.
Well, I guess this is appropriate for me to follow that. I'm Susie Schreiber, and I'm here tonight regarding Memorial Day. And that is a day when we remember and honor those who have given their lives in service of our country. And this year, we are honored to have at least 7 ROTC members from Winnetka in college right now serving. And we have at least 3 on active duty in the Air Force and the Army. And we have 1 young man who was just received his appointment to West Point. But we are, in order to honor all of those who are serving in an ROTC, we're just requesting that please send to either the Park District or the village anybody's name who is currently serving on active duty or in ROTC in college, and let us know so that we don't miss anybody. So, and you know, this is Memorial Day.
Didn't it used to be on the 30th of May?
Yes, sir.
I remember that. No longer.
Okay.
But the weekends
No,
are,
it's,
but the
it's,
weekends
it's
are.
the last Monday in May.
Right.
Now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
Hello, good evening. Colleen Root, 326 Woodland Avenue. I'm present here as a proud citizen of the Village of Winnetka and not with respect to any other governmental position that I hold. But I'm really excited because I'm excited for the opportunity for this village to become a municipal leader and an innovator and a regional partner as you turn your attention to your plan for the East Winnetka stormwater management plan, and as you look at your continuing work on concurrent jurisdiction and governance for our beautiful lake and shore. And Susie has come and spoken to you about the Cook County, what is it here? I've lost my watershed program, and I know you're actively aware of that. But I'm here tonight to advocate for your attention to another program of which you may not be aware and which I just learned about last Friday when I sat down with representatives of the Great Lakes Alliance. And that is an Army Corps program, and it sort of follows Susie because, you know, here we are, Memorial Day, Independence Day. But the program is the Army Corps Great Lakes Resilience Study. And I understand that the Corps is working with municipalities along all of the Great Lakes on a more global and regional approach to coastal management that embraces the concept of engineering with nature and that relies on not hardening our shoreline with armored stone due to the deleterious effect that those stone breakwaters can have on surrounding neighbors, but rather on natural buffers like artificial offshore reefs that we're seeing at work right now on Illinois Beach State Park. And I'd like to suggest, if the village is so inclined, that you invite the Corps, this group of the Corps, to come for an information session for our residents so we can all learn a little more about it. And what's even more exciting about this, there's money out there. There's federal and state grants, and there's a lot of it. So wouldn't it be great is as we look at East Winnetka and our stormwater project, and as we look at our shoreline and some of the proposals right now for public development, that maybe there are some better alternatives, more modern alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Ted Winnichenko. So, I was trying to use the microphone, but anyway, hi, Ted Winnichenko. So I am back because I again want to address the ongoing issue that the village seems to be ignoring. I actually am waiting, I'm hoping that there's going to be a statement regarding the statement that was made 2 weeks ago following the public comment. But regarding falsehoods, I would like the village to address its falsehoods, right? You have all received documentation showing that the Spruce Street stairs were not put there for the public works. They were there for public access. But yet the village has several emails stating a false statement that those were not there for the public and they were moved because the municipal departments didn't need them any longer. You have continued and continue to obstruct village streets, although you all know that the village acknowledged in 2001 that there was no authority in the village code for the staff to do that. And the council has never acted on this to give staff the authority to do it. And you know, there are other examples, but I feel like if we're talking about falsehoods, we need to address the falsehoods that we're spreading. Having said that, since it seems that there is some sort of process that allows streets to be closed, and remember, Lake Michigan is a street in the village code, and that is the front-facing yards of all those houses there, that these through streets, things like Spruce, Cherry, Oak, those are through streets to a village street. So, since there is some sort of process that allows streets to be closed, I would like to find out what that process is, because I feel that my street is very unsafe. You know, after school or before school, a lot of kids, they're running around, they're damaging my property. Dogs go off leash and poop on my grass. Cars, you know, a lot of traffic. It's very dangerous. So I would like to know what the process is to request that the village put up fences on either side of Oak, you know, Glendale and the other one, so that my front yard has the same, nothing better, nothing worse, but the same utility as all the front yards along Lake Michigan, which the village apparently does do. So I do actually want an answer to that question. I hope that someone will provide it. All right. Sorry, I had a lot of problems with the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Anyone else? Come on up, Katie. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a race to the microphone.
I'm not surprised that you didn't see me. My name is Alexandra Nichols. I live at 900 Mount Pleasant here in Winnetka. And I have been going to Winnetka Park District meetings for the last couple of years. Many, many, many meetings. And I can't express the disappointment I have in the process that they've been pushing through. It seems a set agenda that we're not always completely aware of. And I'm here to speak because I feel a very strong feeling about not having a dog beach at Elder and Centennial Beach. Some of us love those two beaches. I think they are the most tranquil and beautiful in our village. And if we don't have sports, which we're not planning to have, we don't have boating, that it would be wonderful and peaceful for people to be able to go down and swim and relax on the most beautiful beach, I think, we have in Winnetka, which is Centennial, and the most gorgeous trees. It's just a beautiful sort of parkland. And if we have a dog beach there with dogs running all around him, barking and playing, I'm a dog person. I have dogs. But I don't want them in that beach because people, along with me, have requested that we have some tranquility in that beach. We certainly don't at Lloyd, and we don't at Tower. And Tower has the capability for a dog beach, I hear from a number of people, and I'm not as knowledgeable as some of you may be, but I request that you will look into that. I don't want a dog beach, which is really at the request of the southern neighbor, Mr. Ishbia. He wanted the dog beach, and that was one of his stipulations. I want a dog beach because he wants a buffer further away from his property. And I am really tired of having any respect whatsoever for his requests, all of which self-centered and not in the best interests of the residents of our village. That's point number one. And number two, listening to the Winnetka Park District's proposal for financials going forward for this beach and the sewer system, it's fiscally irresponsible, which the budgets that they have proposed. And they are entirety with no specifics. We don't really understand what the costs are going to be. And to say $10 million for a dog beach, of course, we all know is outrageous. And so I hope that you will do very keen look, very strong approach to what they have proposed. I am very disappointed, aside from two people on the Park District Board who have a sense of integrity and a moral compass, who've moved forward to this against great opposition, and that you're the last body, I think, which has to finally look at the costs that they're proposing and make a decision which is reasonable and rational. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Nichols, I did want to say that the village offered their entire holdings on the beachfront at Tower Road, and actually I participated on a committee for about 8 months that was targeting the improvements that would be necessary to have a dog beach at Tower Road Beach. At some point, those took a left turn. The Park District indicated that they didn't want to use our property for a dog beach, and at that time, they, I guess, elected to move it south. So we've already been around that merry-go-round a couple times with them, and the offer still stands that they can use our property as long as it's consistent with a responsible plan, and that they figure out how to have beaches and dogs interact.
I'd like you to make every effort to turn that back around again and bring it up with them, because I understand from a number of people, there's a place to do it, and that seems like it is the appropriate place. So we have one beach in this village, which is peaceful and enjoyable. Sorry. I was planning to sit down. No, I asked if you would return to the issue and the question of a beach at Tower, a dog beach at Tower, just because I'd like to know that we have one beautiful beach in our village that is peaceful for swimmers and just to enjoy without recreation, without boating, with all the other things that we have at the other two beautiful beaches. I don't think that's unreasonable.
The offer still stands, and the Park District does understand that we are a willing partner in that endeavor if they decide to go that way.
Well, who has authority? Are they completely independent of you and what
Yes.
they want to do?
Yes.
That's not a good idea. I know that's the way it said it, but in the end, do you have to approve a permit that, Isn't that-
I could go into the whole thing, but we're separate taxing bodies. We have separate revenue sources from tax revenues as well as program revenues. And from time to time, we intersect and try to partner up on things for the benefit of the community. But for most issues, such as the dog beach, that's kind of their baby. And it's their decision, and the public needs to share those thoughts with the commissioners that were elected to serve that board, because alls we can do is review a plan for special use permits and stay within the parameters of what has been laid down in our ordinances, so.
did they turn down their approval of a dog beach there at the same time or at some appropriate or
I
close
don't
time?
remember.
To Mr. Ishbia's issues, because he was very strong. I will not give up the lease on that house. I will not go forward with this project unless I have a dog beach. And we all understood with all those trees and planters that he wanted to put in originally, which he's not had approval for, that he wants the dog beach, and he's not going to go along and be cooperative. At some point, somebody has to stand up and take a firm position and say, no, we're not going to do a dog beach there, period.
It's tricky because this is government, you know, we don't, and trust me, nobody up here likes the fact sometimes that this is government. But, you know, there's rules and bumpers that keep us in our lane, or supposed to keep us in our lane. And we respect those bumpers, and our charter established certain jurisdictional things that we have control over, and certain jurisdictional things that the Park District has control over. And it's improper, and I don't believe serving the public's best interest for us to try to reach across and grab, as much as I would like to from time to time. I don't think it's anything we as a village can, as a village entity can engage in. So, you know, I encourage you to keep sharing your thoughts with the gang over on Hibbard Road there, and when it comes time for their special use permits, they will be in this room, and we'll be discussing those in open session as we always do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Katie.
All right, so, hello, good evening. My name's Katie Stevens, and I'm here looking at the Athenian oath, which you all took, which is to leave it better than you found it. And I'm going to talk about what you have the capability of doing, and what I am praying to God, or whatever you believe, that you consider these issues. If you want to take notes, I've got bullet points for you. I got involved in the Park District for 2.5 years, probably 300 to 400 hours worth of time on this project, which is a lot more than we had initially planned. But you have the opportunity to protect the health and safety of our citizens. That is what you have the purview to do on the water. Number one, the stormwater pipe. Study it, plan it. My question to you is to answer, why would it ever be as a forefather of the village on the north side of a potential swimming beach? To me, no forefather would put a stormwater pipe where the littoral drift comes from this way, on the north side of a public beach. Why rocks versus groins? I got involved because of the views. I want the views on the lakefront. That's really all I got involved for. But the more I got involved, the more unsafe I feel rocks are. They look like, it's like the Titanic. It's like an iceberg. It goes like this, and then it goes like this. People go out, and if they dive in, which we've had several accidents, it's just, groins are an opportunity, and so keep our views. Number two, it'll be a long time that these rocks or groins or whatever will be in, just like our pier and our groins have been there for 70+ years. They've done a great job. The southern end of Centennial, I believe, has a 90+ foot beach. So the groins work, revetment works, rocks in the lake. I offered to take anyone on a boat tour to show you where the rocks don't work. And if we want to pay $21 million of our tax dollars for rocks in the lake, I will prove to you that they don't work. Number 3, make sure we don't flood. I live in East Winnetka. I'm 3 doors north of this project. I also lived in another place east in Winnetka where stormwater pipes were changed, and I think you really need to study if I'm going to flood and if all of Fuller Lane and East Winnetka is going to flood. We're getting a pipe that is twice the size, comes down from, if you picture Green Bay, a slope of 20 feet, then is going to make a left turn, which I don't know if any of you have done plumbing jobs, but water doesn't really make a left turn very easily. And then it's going to go through a filter, which may back it up and may push flooding into our homes. So I want you to really study that and do it right. It'll be affecting all of us for years. The rocks are permanent. They're a great expense. You did a great job on stormwater. We were very involved in the stormwater project at the very beginning that Chris managed. But you guys have an obligation to us to preserve our property as much as preserve someone else's property. Please ensure that you do this right. Rocks block the views. And finally, you mentioned the dog beach, and I agree with everything that Alessandra said. The dog beach was offered, and the Park District said that there was a riptide that occurred. They have agreed, just so you know, the Park District has agreed that Lloyd is too high at 291, and they would give you the rocks. I call it a little popcorn wall. There's like another name for it that could go on the northern side of the pier that would stop the riptide, and everything could be solved. The next thing I want to tell you is Kenilworth is doing an amazing job of doing groins that are a little bit taller. They're not looking at rocks or $21.5 to $25 million. And you guys should take a look at other options that we have asked and begged for 2.5 years. We have asked for a visual minimalist plan that suits our citizens, not the privacy of homeowners. Please help us actualize this plan. Leave it better than you found it. Our forefathers, in my opinion, you are the new forefathers, would never put a stormwater pipe on the north end of any property that we own.
Thanks, Katie. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will close public comment and we'll move forward with item 5, which is reports. Trustee reports. We'll start with Tina.
No report.
Kirk.
No report.
Bob.
Right?
Yeah.
Red's dead. I will make a report that on Friday, a number of trustees and village staff attended a wonderful seminar hosted by Elrod Friedman. It was their 17th biennial seminar for local government officials. And I think Rob was there, and Kirk was there, and Tina was there, and I was there, a number of village staff. Bridget, I didn't see you there, Bridget. Bridget was there.
I saw her.
Okay, well, I didn't see her. Oh, boo-hoo. Anyway, but Ben was there, and David was there, and there were a whole bunch of people there, and it was really terrific. And there were great topics, but at the end, there was one topic that pertained to our last 10 minutes, and that had to do with what Elrod Friedman is suggesting in terms of some standards or rules or whatever it has to do with public comment. And they had a number of very rational and reasonable suggestions that I think we should look into. And I'm sure Ben can provide those to us. And you could take 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, but there's a reason, there was a method for their madness in coming up with these. And I think that, I think they made a lot of sense. So anyway, it was a great seminar nonetheless.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Kim?
No report.
Bridget, I'm sorry. Okay, Ron.
No report tonight.
Okay, thank you. Village attorney,
No report.
village manager,
No report this evening.
and village president. No report, except that I became a grandfather for the second time last Thursday, which was awesome. Yeah, I had a lot to do with it. It was a girl. Maggie Teresa came in at 7 pounds, 13 ounces, and definitely a keeper. And everybody says she looks like me, which the poor kid is going to have a long, sad life if that's the case, so. All right, and I also prepared a statement, probably disappointing to most in the room, but I'll go ahead and share my thoughts with you. And I prepared a statement because otherwise I'd be talking for 45 minutes and everybody up here would kill me, so. Anyway, at the last regular meeting, I made reference to a Chicago Tribune article that drew my attention to some of the discussions that were part of the Winnetka Park District's marathon session regarding their planned improvements at Elder and Centennial Park. During that meeting, several comments were made by members of the board as well as residents suggesting that the village was remiss in its efforts to address the east side stormwater issues and that the village should pay for the improvements related to the relocation of the Elder stormwater discharge to facilitate their plan. I was troubled by the way that the village had been characterized as obstinate and unwilling. More troubling was the manner in which certain statements were made, seemingly to arouse public sentiment in an effort to manipulate potential negotiations between the taxing bodies. I thought long and hard as to how Village Council could respond to these statements, and it became clear to me that nothing positive could be gained through a point-by-point rebuttal, as it would only serve to open and widen a divide between the two agencies that have shown an ability to work in the past for the best interest of the community at large. So, rather than waste everybody's time and energy, I believe it's better to provide a few facts on the current outfall pipe and the village's ongoing east side stormwater mitigations and leave it at that. Truth always seems to find the light of day sooner or later, and we have many important initiatives up here, including lakefront regulations that require our attention and intellect. We will not waste our energy debating actions of other taxing bodies. With respect to the pipe, the village has no current plans to change or alter the existing discharge at Elder. We recently had the entire pipe televised by American Underground, who is a third-party provider who specializes in analyzing these sorts of things. While aging, the pipe was found to be in fine working order and condition, with the exception of an end section that was damaged over the years of battering on the lakeshore. Initially, when this condition was brought to our attention, the consensus was to avoid wasting taxpayer dollars repairing something that appeared to be destined for replacement by the Park District's plan. Since the end section damage does not compromise the capacity or the function of the system or public safety, we will leave this lie until the path becomes clearer. Incidentally, we haven't even seen a formal submission from the Park District on any of this, only a series of concepts which seem to constantly be changing. Much like our West Side project, the Park District made their facilities available to us to facilitate stormwater storage, as long as we paid for the construction and the restoration of the areas we disturbed. The Park District agreed to pay for any further enhancement beyond what our scope of work was. It was an fair and effective model that recognized both parties' budgetary constraints. I believe that serves as a good template for future collaborations. In the case of the pipe, engineering and water quality standards have changed significantly over the years. That pipe is very old. And any alteration or modification of the existing system would need to comply with those standards. Relocating this pipe and bringing it up to modern day standards is an expensive and unnecessary endeavor, but for the Park District project. The replacement of the outfall is not included in our current east side flood remediation program, as we have been focused on many upstream issues that contributed to sanitary sewer backcharge into the homes of residents of the affected areas. everybody needs to understand that the big rains that we had back in '09, '11, and I think '13, we had another big one. The cause of the flooding was distinctly different on the east and the west side. On the west side, it really was just surface water pouring into people's yards, overrunning their foundations and their area wells, and flooding into their basement from the outside in. On the east side, water was infiltrating the sanitary sewers. And the problem is that water continued to build and create pressure. It forced water back in through the sanitary sewer. So people on the east side reported more of floor drains bubbling up, of toilets bubbling up, of sinks bubbling up in their basements as this stormwater was getting pushed back into their house through the sanitary system. Totally different phenomenon caused by the same event. As part of a village-wide initiative, these causes were studied in great depth back in 2011 and 2012. These studies revealed that many privately owned systems were cross-connected, which means that the stormwater was entering the sanitary system through illegal storm drains, downspout collectors, and the like. Some people just had these apparatus, like their yard drain, connected to their sanitary sewer rather than the storm sewers. So it was just adding fuel to the fire, so to speak. The village embarked on a long-term program to identify these cross-connections and eliminate them. Additionally, it was found that certain areas of the aging system were cracked or loosened over the years, and it required internal relining to alleviate the infiltration of storm and groundwater. Since that time, the village has invested $5.3 million in addressing these conditions on the east side, which has helped greatly reduce the backflow problems. Katie, you mentioned you're not having problems anymore? Well, this is... I'm not saying yours were, but if somebody up on Hawthorne was cross-connected, it ended up in the same sewer. The work is budgeted and annually, and it continues to this day. Additionally, this year, the village is in the process of retaining a consultant to help address the east side overland water issues that cause street and yard flooding, and in some cases, basements. Funds for this work was included in our 2023 budget. The bottom line is this: different problems, different solutions, same focus. Any suggestion that we haven't been paying attention to the east side is just wrong. Our staff is very capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time. At this time, the village cannot predict what improvements or enhancements must be made to any of the current outfalls along the lakefront, and we won't be coerced into spending your money on improvements we don't even know are needed. Any funds we allocate to this project or to any project must be thoroughly vetted through our annual budgeting process, all of which occurs in open session during November, and everybody's welcome to join. Furthermore, suggesting that the village should divert funds to a pet project of another taxing body is not in the spirit of collaboration and sound financial planning. I will never understand how one arrives at the conclusion that because the village has embarked on a large-scale project, funds should be diverted to a non-budgeted expenditure for the benefit of a separate and independent taxing body. The village has strategically and diligently saved for over 20 years to address our stormwater issues. We have saved and saved and saved. And we've also secured substantial funding from outside agents to ease the burden on our residents. We planned for decades before we spent and had a solid plan that was vetted in public forums before we proceeded, and they were debated heavily at the time. To my way of thinking, and I think I have the support of all my colleagues up here, this is the proper process to undertake when spending the tax dollars of our residents. Anything less is shirking the responsibilities that we were entrusted to steward. With that, I ask that the community trust those sitting here at this dais this evening. We have a proven track record of thoroughly debating and deliberating on how our neighbors' monies get spent. Whatever the outcome, please rest assured that our process will guide us to the best decisions that we can make. And that's all I have on that. All right, item 6 is establishment of the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove any items on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda? Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And item 7 is the approval of the consent agenda, and I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the village agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the council meeting minutes for the May 2nd, 2023 regular meeting. Approval of the warrant list dated April 21st, 2023 through May 4th, 2023 in the amount of $2,719,788.94. Resolution number R53, 2023, awarding a contract to Centale Solutions LLC for upgrade and expansion of the village's security and door system. Resolution number R54, 2023, approving an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Winnetka Park District related to the North of Willow Road Stormwater Project. Resolution number R55, 2023, approving a contract with Hare Construction for sewer relining work. Resolution number R56, 2023, approving a contract with American Underground for sanitary sewer inspection services and approval of additional annual outdoor seating area permits.
Okay, thank you. That was sewer relining, you said?
Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dahlman.
Yes.
Trustee Apatow.
Yes.
Trustee Orsic.
Yes.
Trustee Handler.
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn.
Yes.
Trustee Albertson.
Yes.
Awesome. That motion carries, and we'll move forward to ordinances and resolution. Our first item this evening is ordinance number M08, 2023, granting a special use permit, variations from Winnetka zoning ordinance, and a certificate of appropriate for construction of a new mixed-use building within the C2 General Retail Commercial District, AKA 564 Green Bay Road, and this is up for introduction tonight. The applicant has proposed the construction of a new 4-story mixed-use building consisting of residential and commercial space. And our Community Development Director, David Schoen, will kick it off with his review.
Good evening. Yes, I'll go through a review of the project and the advisory body's recommendations. So just briefly to highlight, the subject property is located on the west side of Green Bay Road between Spruce Streets and Elm Street in the Elm Street Business District. As the zoning map here indicates, the property is zoned C2 General Retail Commercial District. It is located outside of the village's commercial overlay district. The new land use map of our new comprehensive plan designates the subject property as appropriate for commercial and mixed use development. It's located in an area that consists of mixed uses, and the zoning of the property is consistent with that land use designation. We've included images of the project site within your materials, and they're here on the screen right now. As you may recall, in 2002, the applicant submitted a zoning relief application for a new 3-story mixed-use building with a rooftop deck. At that time, the applicant proposed only 2 residential apartment units and was providing 1 parking space for each residential unit for a total of 2 parking spaces, while 3 parking spaces were required. After review and unanimous recommendations of your advisory bodies, the village council did approve the special use and variations that were required for that project and are similar but slightly different for the project before you this evening. To review the project quickly, this is a site plan representing that the proposed building would continue to have vehicular access from the public alley along the rear of the property. As was previously proposed, on the ground floor and the basement level would be commercial space, which would be occupied by Engel and Volker, which is a real estate office, which is allowed by right and does not require special use approval on this property, as the property is not located in the overlay district. As a reminder, Engel and Volkers currently occupies a second floor space in the Laundry Mall building on Chestnut. If the proposed development is approved, they would plan to relocate that office into this space. As represented here on the first floor plan on the left, there are 2 enclosed parking spaces at the street level at the rear of the building. Locating parking spaces on the ground floor requires special use approval. Then on the upper levels, there would be a residential unit on each of the upper levels. They would be 2 bedrooms of approximately 1,700 square feet. Per our code, a minimum of 1.5 parking spaces is required for a 2-bedroom unit. Therefore, 5 off-street parking spaces are required for the residential units. The applicant has stated that they would plan to find an off-site space to lease. Under our current zoning, the code does not recognize off-premise parking for residential use as qualifying for required parking. Therefore, the variation of 3 parking spaces is required for the project. And then on the 4th floor, there is the 3rd residential unit, slightly different configuration as they have pushed the 4th floor unit back from the street by 10 feet, as was requested by the design review board. And by doing that, they now comply with our 4th story setback requirement along the street. Here you can see proposed front and rear elevations of the proposed building. And we've also provided, the applicant, I should say, has provided a rendering of the proposed building, and also the materials that they propose to use on the facade are included in the documents. So the proposed project requires 2 variations. One is the rear yard setback that has not changed since the previous proposal. And then also the off-street parking, which I have mentioned earlier. Those are the 2 variations that are required. Your 3 advisory bodies have reviewed the proposal. The design review board took a couple of meetings. They had some comments on materials that had originally been proposed to be used, as well as the design of the front setback. The applicant came back to a subsequent meeting with changes to the materials, as well as providing that 4th story setback, and then the design review board unanimously recommended approval of the design of the project as presented to them. Then in April, the ZBA considered both the special use for the location of the parking as well as the 2 variations. By a vote of 4 to 1, the ZBA recommended approval. The main issue of discussion for the board was the parking variations. Those who favored the project found that our parking requirements may no longer be fitting, especially for a site located in close proximity to 2 forms of public transportation and in a business district where a resident is in easy walking distance to many businesses and community services. They also discussed the challenges of trying to provide additional parking on this site, given the size of the site. The lot is only 35 feet in width and 2,500 square feet. So they recognize some challenges in terms of trying to provide the commercial on the 1st floor, which is the desire of the community to have, as well as provide parking and provide additional residential units in our downtown, which commission members identified as something we've talked about with the adoption of our new comprehensive plan. And they felt in the end, the market would determine who would want to rent the space based upon the availability of parking, whether it's an on-site space or if the developer finds a space off-site for lease. So as I said, the ZBA recommended approval by a vote of 4-1. Then the Plan Commission at the end of April reviewed just the special use permit for the location of the parking. And based upon their review, just on that request, they also recommended approval by a vote of 7-0. I would note during the advisory body's review of the application, no written comments were received from the public. There was one member of the public who spoke at the Design Review Board meeting about concerns about parking. But that was the only comment that had been received during the advisory body's review. This evening, the council has received an additional public comment regarding concerns about parking. Given that the zoning board did not unanimously recommended approval, this item is on your agenda only as introduction, there's no option to introduce and adopt because the recommendations were not unanimous. So the ordinance can be found on page 773 of the agenda packet. And I'd be happy to answer questions now, President Rintz, or until after you hear from the
Well,
applicant.
yeah, I'd like
and
to
the
hear from
public.
the applicant and have a little bit deeper explanation of why the change. So if you want to go ahead and take it from here, we'd appreciate it. You got a twofer tonight, Cal.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the council, my name is Cal Bernstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant. You know, it's what Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again. We're coming back a second time with this project. If you recall, last year we were here and the project was approved unanimously for commercial space on the first floor with 2 apartments above. And Paul, who is the principal for the owner of the property, is here to discuss why there's a change. Because really, this is the same project that was approved last year, except for one change. One additional unit was added. The setbacks are the same. The relief regarding special use for parking on the first floor is the same because just the size of the lot makes it impossible to go underground. And so, Paul, why don't you could address why the change and why you're going forward with requesting one additional unit.
Sure. Well, thank you for the time again this evening. So between our original application and now where we are now, the environment changed quite a bit, as you were probably all aware, financially. So interest rates roughly doubled within that time. So we very much want to do this project. We're right nearby and really have a presence in Winnetka. And so we really had to figure out what else can we do to economically just make this work out a bit better. We were aware that there was perhaps a little bit of extra room to develop the top level instead of just having a roof deck to actually have income, which I think also benefits the neighborhood and the community as well. So that was really the primary driver for it. We wish we could have gone forward. The timing just didn't work out well enough. As far as rents and with and without parking, we've done quite a bit of research. Most of the available locations in Winnetka are older at this time, but we did see in Winnetka as well as nearby villages with and without parking. We very much want to, if it's needed, we want to fulfill the parking requirement. We actually did some research as well as had some initial discussions on where we could have that parking should it be needed. Thank you.
So just to remind the board that, again, this is an irregular small lot. The existing structure is non-conforming, and what is proposed is actually reducing the non-conformity as to the rear yard setback. This is the Well, as proposed, this is the only way this property can be redeveloped consistent with the master plan. And the alternatives that we considered is, it would be, we think, more intense because you could actually reactivate the commercial space with more intense uses that were being proposed right now, and that use does not require any additional parking. There was an extensive and robust discussion with regard to parking both at the Zoning Board of Appeals and at the Plan Commission. And the minutes from the meeting really tell the tale of what was discussed. And as Mr. Bradley had stated at the Zoning Board, that he felt that this property was unique and that there be no precedent set by approving the project as required, and that there's an actual desire and a demand for this type of product. And this is what the village was targeting when they implemented the new master plan, was a type of development like this, a mixed use, commercial first floor, residential above. And they felt this would be a very good experiment to see how this works in the downtown central business district. It's a transit-oriented district, an area. We have, as David mentioned, there's 2 mass transit availability around it. There's the train, the metro across the street. You have the bus that goes right in front. And so we're requesting, one more thing is that they also mentioned that pillars number 1, 2, and 8 were found to be applicable to this situation based on your new master plan, and therefore that supported the granting of the special use permit and also the variations. So what we're trying to do is create a product that is unique for Winnetka, for young professionals, empty nesters, and we believe that this could be a template for maybe future developments, but this is a good place to start on a small building like this. So we're seeking we're seeking you to accept the recommendations from the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board and approve the project. And we're available for any questions. We have the architect here today, and we have other principals from Ingalls and Volker here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great. All right, gang, any questions for David or the applicant?
Yeah.
I have one.
Yes.
So I just want to confirm that what we're being asked is to approve the building with only 2 parking spaces.
Correct.
No alleys. Somewhere I read about alley spaces, but no, this is just 2 parking spaces in the building.
Yes.
Okay, basically, has there originally, I think I heard the original presentation when I was on the zoning board. There was a plan which is shown in here with the car lift to add a 3rd one. I recognize that was one idea when there'd be 2 apartments, but it would be more difficult with 3. Was there any thought to adding that back to provide a 3rd parking spot within the building, and it's up to the residents to figure it all out?
Well, the zoning board was pretty adamant that they didn't like the idea of the lifts.
Well, we said it wasn't great, but it would be okay if that's really what you felt was a good solution.
Well, my recollection was that both the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board did not like the idea of the lifts because it was cumbersome and difficult to use, because obviously you have to remove the car to bring the lift down to actually make it work. And that was, our bill, we were seeking to basically create that 3rd space when the 2 units.
Right,
What we did
I
propose,
was there.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah. So what we did propose, because we thought a better idea than the lifts, other communities, and Ben can speak to this also, other communities allow off-site parking to count towards the parking lot, parking count. Winnetka does not allow it. For example, Highland Park does. You could park within 500 feet of the development if you could tie up a parking space by at least 3 years in term. That they would accept that as meeting the parking requirement for the building, for the site. Winnetka does not allow this. When we brought that to the zoning board, we said, as an alternative, we could tie up. We have a parking space within probably 100 feet of the site that we can enter into a long-term lease. If the zoning board desires us to do this, and they were not interested. They said no. We were fine with the 2 parking spaces, and we're okay with 1 unit not having a space. And that's what the conclusion
So
of this
obviously
zoning
these
board.
leases would be with a private party.
Yes.
It would be with a condo development down the street that might be willing to lease.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and other towns recognize that and accept that as part of the parking count.
Okay, so again, not that I realize it's cumbersome, but the lift is not under consideration?
I mean, we would do it, I mean, but it's really, it was not like.
But,
it was-
I mean, yeah, I recognize you'd have to be really friendly neighbors to make all that work.
Yes. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's just a really cumbersome issue,
Okay,
way to
thank
deal with it.
And I can speak to the lift a little bit from the Plan Commission perspective. The neighbor next door, Fred's, is worried about the alley being congested, and the feeling was that the lift would do nothing to help that, but would make the problem much, much worse, because then you would have trucks going and lifts being used. And I think that the lift also required a special use, because I don't think that the lift itself qualified. So the thought was fewer cars back there makes the alley less crowded and less congested. And I know that Chair Bradley was not necessarily a fan of getting the off-site parking, because there is a belief that somebody might want to rent these units as they are with less parking, and that if they wanted to get off-site parking, they could, and maybe the people could give them phone numbers of places they could do that, but otherwise we might be tying up a parking spot that somebody else could use. And at the end of the day, if these don't rent out because nobody is interested, that's Engels and Volker's problem, not ours, right? They lose rent money, but the village is not harmed by that. So it's a rather interesting experiment, given that we're looking for diverse housing. And I think that was why the point was really to the lift, that we thought the cars were not going to be useful back there as it was, and the lift would add to the
Again, I
problem.
was asking if that was still on the table as just one solution.
Right.
Because it was a solution.
Yeah, and again, and the trustee's correct, is that when we talked about this last year, the neighbor to the north, Fred's Garage, he did not like, he wanted to limit the activity in the alley, because that's where his delivery trucks are going through there, and he thought adding an additional car would create more congestion in there, and especially when you're moving cars around in the winter and things like that, and that he didn't like the idea for the lift, and we accepted those suggestions and we removed it. And it was approved last year without the lifts.
Okay, let's recenter the conversation a little bit here. At this point, we're looking for just simple questions. We'll go ahead and duke it out and deliberate after we get through this in public comment, but I just want questions for either David or for the applicant at this point. Go ahead, Tina.
I think I thought there was an elevator in the building, but is there not an elevator? It's a walk-up? Maybe
I'm the architect, Nathan Kipnis.
Yeah.
So there is an elevator from the first floor down to the basement, strictly in the commercial space.
Okay. Is there, obviously that limits the market too. But yeah, thank you. There's no space, I assume, for an elevator going up?
This is a very tight site.
Yeah, I know.
It's
You've got
a lot of stuff going on.
You've
so-
got two stairwells stacked right next to
Well,
each other.
yeah, we're, as per code.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Following up on that, so it does, just because of the stairs, it does limit a little bit if you're talking about retirees or downsizers, 75, 80-year-olds, it does limit a little bit. And so addressing the younger market, the market that you described, what is the anticipated rent for these units?
So currently, we're seeing it was about 2.25 for older buildings, so per square foot. So I think we're looking at about 2.5 to 2.75 per square foot for rent.
So $5,000 a month?
Probably somewhere between $4,200 and $4,800.
How big are these things?
I don't know
And
about
the
your,
top- the
don't,
top
don't know
unit-
about your kids.
The top unit will be
Yeah,
less.
My kids could not afford that. So that's, as Bridget said, I think that's ultimately your market call. So just going, all right, go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can I ask David a question here?
Sure.
So this is kind of old business, I guess, on the thing, but I looked at the parking study that was done And this had to do with the commercial, I think it was for the off-site, for the commercial property, I believe, the parking study was made, I believe. And I don't know if anyone else looked at that. I guess I didn't look at it closely enough when we approved this last time. But that study was done 2/22/22, which happened to be the Tuesday after President's Day last year. And it said that the peak demand for parking in that area was anywhere from 61 to 66% of the available parking spaces. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if anyone's driven in that West Elm district, there are times when the peak is 97%. So I do kind of question that parking study. I don't know if you guys looked at that, if Barnall looked at that, but one, it was done on a day where, you know, people are out of town, number one.
The village engineer did look at that, did review the study and found that it met acceptable traffic planning practices in terms of that. I mean, I will say, there, depending upon the area you're looking at, there are times when it's not 100% full.
Oh, this was the peak. They said that the peak parking demand was 61 to 66%. The peak. So that means that at the peak time over there, if I read it correctly, you're going to have 34 to 39% of empty spaces.
I would have to review the study again to look at the exact wording.
That includes the post office, yes. No, it was just the area around, you know, it was Spruce and Elm, Chestnut, it was that area. So I look at that study and that's questionable.
Yeah, so 2 points, that, that's looking at the commercial use. The commercial use, this use is allowed by right. The parking study wasn't required for the use to go into the space. They looked at the parking study in terms of parking in the area as it relates to surface parking.
For the commercial space.
Correct. No. For parking in general, they were looking at it in terms of the special use for parking on the ground floor, giving a flavor for what parking is in the area. This use, the real estate office can go in this space by right. No parking study is required. So the issue of parking on the variation is related to the residential uses.
I understand that, but there was a parking study included. I'm just pointing out, for whatever reason, they commissioned the parking study. I question the results of the parking study.
Can I follow up on that? Just a quick question on that, because one of the things, when this was the school, do we know how many employees were working there? And, I mean, I think there was more employees when it was a school.
I don't have that information.
But keep in mind, New Trier's not off that week. So it's not like ski week here, like it is in other places, like people are in town that week.
I think we've all driven through that area.
Oh, yeah.
And it defies belief, I think, that at the peak parking in that area, you're gonna have 35% open spaces.
Yeah.
So that's all. I mean, it's not, I just bring it up. Anyway, okay.
Is there any public comment on this item? That doesn't include a representative of the applicant.
Thank you. Jeffrey Liss again, 640 Winnetka Mews, Winnetka, which has 1.5 parking spaces per unit. It seemed to work out just about right, anyway. You all, I guess, have seen my letter, but for the benefit of the hundreds of people in your viewing audience, let me summarize some of these points and comment on some of the things that we heard here. First of all, preliminarily, in my experience before the various boards in Winnetka, the advisory or subsidiary boards have always said, okay, this is what we think, but the village board has longer expertise and power and can change what we do. The village board, on the other hand, says, well, yes, but the advisory boards have more expertise, so we can defer to them. And it's sometimes a little bit circular on that, the bus gets passed. The problem here is, from my point of view, is I really like the idea of getting more residential properties downtown. What's the reason we moved to the Muse? Everything is walking distance. Everything is walking distance, but my wife and I still need 2 cars. Even if I commuted downtown, I need my car for all sorts of other things. My wife needs her cars for other things, and people are not reviewing or really going downtown as much. To me, the idea that's being advanced by, actually, I suppose environmentalists, which I'm among them, is that you don't need cars if you're near a transportation-oriented development. That, to me, is just really bogus. It doesn't affect the need for cars for everything else. And if you have 2 people living there, like a 2-bedroom unit, you probably need 2 cars. Also, the idea, well, you're right by the central business district. Well, I'm right by the central business district, but I assure you, most of my shopping and most of my visits do not go to the central business district, and I don't really bring big shopping bags or carts away from there. Even when I go to the Grand, I can walk to the Grand, never mind. So to me, the reasons for asking for a waiver are like totally bogus. We have a village ordinance which makes a lot of sense. 1.5 units per residential spaces per residence. And that works well, and it covers the whole village. It doesn't have an exception for things near the train station. It never has. And the reason it never has is because it didn't make sense to have an exception for what's by the train station. So you're asking for a waiver of a rule that makes common sense. What they're really asking for is you change the ordinance. Now, I remember during the discussion of the 2040 plan, a distinguished member of this council pointed out that when it came to parking, builders and developers will be using their microscopes to find any kind of loophole or precedent that they could use to get around those parking requirements, which have been there for a very good reason. Now, this, in a way, seems to me very much a harbinger of what could happen, even if somebody says, well, it's not a precedent. And I'm torn because I like the idea of more parking downtown. I realize the unique, well, pardon me, let me not use the word, the special nature of that limited property. I understand that people who buy townhouses and they're willing to walk up 3 stories don't know much about 4-story walk-ups, particularly if you're paying $4,800 a month for an apartment. Those kind of people are likely to really have a parking demand. So here's my conundrum as a member of the village of Winnetka, and I suppose it's your conundrum too. I think this is a project you might like, but you're asked to be given a waiver for reasons that make no sense at all. There is nothing of their waiver request that would differ from any other waiver of any other mixed-use building in that area. And if their waiver request is good for them, I see no reason why it wouldn't be good for everyone else. And to me, the concern transcends this one project. So, what I would say, hypothetically speaking, if you want to give a waiver, particularly since it's not being passed tonight, you come up or have the developer come up with a reason exactly why this property is so unique that whatever reason you give for giving a waiver would not be applicable to any other property.
We gotta wrap it up, Jeff.
Okay, I will wrap it up. But if you can't do that, it just seems to me that they haven't proved the case for a waiver, which I'm sorry to say. And I just would hate to see the precedent set for bogus reasons. Thank you.
Thanks. Would anybody else like to speak on this?
Chris, I had a question when you're done.
Seeing no, what?
I didn't excuse myself too.
Oh.
I didn't get a chance to comment.
No, we haven't gone there yet.
Okay,
Rob,
great,
you're
thank
okay. Okay, I'll close public comment, and now we'll bring it back up here for more conversation, debate, deliberation, and see where we end up.
Can I just ask a quick question again?
Go ahead.
Of the applicant, you mentioned that if we did ask to have the other 3 spots provided with parking, that you would be willing to do that, or you've thought about ways to do that? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So originally we were thinking 3, so 1 additional. We didn't have conversations for the full, so 3 total as opposed to 5.
Okay. You would have the 2 in and then 1 out. Have
and
you
then
thought
one
about the
additional.
5? Have you thought about ways that?
We hadn't considered that yet, but probably would go through the same mechanism to do that is talk to nearby. I understand that that doesn't necessarily apply in this case.
Okay. Okay.
Let's go, guys.
Okay. First of all, I think it's, as we said before, I'm just trying to think back to the last time we discussed, it's a really lovely building. I think it's a beautiful addition. I'm just trying to refresh, the 2 spots that are in the garage, are those are for residents or are they for work? Just residents. So, and if I'm right, there's no, residents really can't park out in front at night because our ordinance, after 2 o'clock. Not that I've been up at 2 o'clock lately, but.
Or they have to purchase a parking pass and park in a village lot.
So, I do agree that it's unrealistic to think somebody's gonna have 1 car. If it's a family, if it's multiple people, I think there will be 2 cars, and I'm just trying to understand it. And my other concern is if the Grand ever enforces their parking rule, and I don't know if they will or not. I mean, it is true, technically, their parking lot that is used for all the spillover from that whole, from Fred's, from Pomeroy, from Green Bay Cafe. So that's the only, those are my concerns about, and the other, and trust me, I'd love this thing to happen. My other thought is from legal, is this precedent setting in any way? From a standpoint of the extra floor, because we're talking, and I get why, I'd be doing the same thing about another floor for more rent, because it's for economics. But
Yeah, it is not precedent setting. So when we evaluate zoning applications, whether it's a variation, a special use, a planned development, there's, first of all, there's not a concept of precedent the same way there is like with an appellate court case that sets the law. So from a legal perspective, it's not precedential. Practically speaking, what you're evaluating are the standards. Is the application that's before you, does it meet the standards? And different properties have different facts, they're different sizes, they have different occupancies and so forth. And so there's no legal reason that if you were to grant this, that you would have to be granting the same relief in other properties. Now, decisions can't be arbitrary, completely arbitrary, but I think if you're grounding your decision in the standards, then there is no legal issue, and I don't think there's any issue in terms of another applicant at another building at another location coming forward, because there is no precedent.
Okay, thank you, very helpful.
Can I just add something about the cars? I know, as I've already said, that we're talking about our strategic planning for the future and trying new ways of housing and things like that. And when I turned 16, I raced to the driver's facility to get my license, and all my friends did, and we couldn't wait. You would be shocked how many kids go off to college without driver's licenses, and I have more than one set of grown adults with multiple jobs that live in $1.5 million houses that have 1 car. It's not a big deal to me how many people have cars in this, because this is their risk. If they can't attract people, that's their risk. They're not going to have the rent. So it's not that important to me whether or not they attract people with 2 cars and then have a conundrum. Like, they won't attract those people. They'll attract people with 1 car or no cars, or they'll lose money on the project and have to figure out something else. I was just going to say that the car thing is not what it used to be, and that's probably relevant.
Hey, Bridget, can you elaborate? When you say you have people, you mean like clients that you're representing coming up from the city looking for housing?
I'm speaking more of friends, both in the city and in Winnetka. I have friends that live in Winnetka now with 2 high school-aged kids, more than 1 set of them, who have 1 car. And if, like, one of the spouses is using the car, they're like, hit me up for rides all the time. They're like, oh, I don't have the car today. But it's not like they ever thought we're going to get 2 cars. because they haven't felt they've needed it. So I'm just saying it's not as preposterous as it sounds to think that there are people who can pay those rents that want only one car or no cars. And again, if there aren't those people, that's on them. You know, the village is not losing anything by them not having tenants for their property.
You know what? Let me jump in here. I don't get to deliberate much, because usually I let you guys do it, but we're talking about 3 units, right? Our code would require 4.5 spaces, call it 5, because you can't round down a car, right? You round it up. So we're talking about 3 parking spaces that are available for the residents. I'm probably going out on a limb here, but you know, we have several municipal lots, and you know, if the parking is what's really giving everybody heartburn here, or some people heartburn, maybe the way to approach this is to enter into some sort of a financial arrangement with the owner of the building, attach a stipulation to the property, and they will in perpetuity lease 3 spaces over behind the Grand from the village for a substantial amount of money, something worthwhile, or the value to tie up 3 spaces 24/7. And that way, problem solved. We don't have to worry about the parking. They've solved it by purchasing the right to park 3 cars in the village lot. We make a little money on the deal, and everybody should be happy at that point. Yeah, Tina. Just an idea.
Yeah, and I
Now
like
I'll
that
shut up again.
idea. I also am a little bit worried about forcing the market, right? This is gonna be a walk-up. I look at this and say, this could be for somebody who's recently divorced, who may only have somebody, a second occupant periodically, may only need 1 car. Like I would hate to force the market by saying you have to attach and lease. Like if you take if you're taking occupancy with this apartment, you would have to lease 2 extra spaces.
No, I mean, the developer or the owner of the building would be required to purchase in perpetuity the right to 3 spaces in the village lot. So they would always be available in the event that you ended up with 1.5 cars per unit. And
But what
that
if
solves for the number problem and the location problem.
or what if somebody, just move, I mean, this price point is not that bad in terms of somebody who's a young professional moving down, only needs 1 or doesn't have a car, uses an Uber. I guess I'm worried about attaching that financial consideration, Chris, just because, I don't want it to.
Well, they don't have to take it.
That's
I mean,
true.
and
But I'm just saying to the board, that I'm always worried about those unintended consequences of the cost of those things, right? If the market's there, I mean, and they're willing to take the risk. Now, but we could enter into a financial agreement to make it available if they find that they can't lease it.
I think if there's
But
enough.
that's just my thought.
And I don't know where the vote's gonna fall, but I've heard concerns from several trustees about the parking. And I'm just trying to find a way that we can navigate something in the middle here that works. We're not in the business of protecting real estate developers from making bad decisions as witnessed across the street, okay? And we're not gonna do it here tonight either. But at the same time, if the code is 4.5 and you guys are hard on that, then that's one possible way to solve it. Or recognize that we're talking about a couple of cars, and let's not burn up all evening worried about where two residents are gonna park. Go ahead, Kirk.
What is the real concern here? Is the concern we're gonna have cars where there are nowhere to park them? Is the concern we're setting precedent because of the ordinance? I mean, I'm just a little, as the new person on the block, need to understand what is the concern, the legitimate concern. If there are too many cars for the renters in this building, what happens? I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, well, there's no precedence. I mean, our village attorney
Well-
just told us there wasn't any, so we have to worry about that.
There's no legal
Precedent.
precedent, but I assure you that, when the next one is proposed half a mile down or whatever it is, they're gonna say, well, what about that building? You let them go
But what
with
is the
one.
concern for that?
The concern is that, and I'm all for these infill developments, I think it's great, but we have a standard here. The Muse has 1.5. 812 Oak, I'll bet they have 1.5. 711 Lincoln, or whatever it is, I'll bet they have 1.5 per unit. I mean, we have 1.5 per unit. I mean, that is, now, it was said in the minutes of maybe the Plan Commission, or maybe it was the zoning, that it's outdated. Maybe it's outdated, maybe it's not outdated. I'm not just gonna take that as fact. I actually kind of agree with some of the comments that were made in public comment. And so I think that we have a standard, and if there's a way to navigate the standard, that's a pretty good solution perhaps, then we should, because there will be more of these coming, and we have when you bring it all together, we have a parking issue. It comes up all the time, all over town, we have a parking issue. And if we start modifying the standards to accommodate, frankly, the change in economics, I mean, that's what's driving this. And, you know, I think the strange thing about this, and don't mean to go on a soapbox here, but the strange thing about this, I think that if you had come here a year ago and did the 4-story, because it was at the same level as the building to your south, if you had done that and proposed that, and probably covered the parking issue, it probably would have been approved back a year ago to do that, because the height of it, in the context of the neighboring building, it was not out of whack. But it was approved as a 3-story building. I thought the DRB did a nice job, by the way. But it was approved as a 3-story building with the 1 parking spot, and I think it's a slippery slope, is what we're talking about here.
Couple follow-up questions. Do we know when this 1.5 ratio was put in place? And then second question is, for the product that we have, multifamily product that predates, let's say, a lot of where there were parking ratios, such as a lot of the product on Chestnut or Elm or just anywhere older product, what is the ratio of stalls for those multifamily units?
0.
And have we experienced any problems because of the 0 to 1 parking ratio? Have we had problems with that?
I believe so.
They're parking issues, sure.
But what is the resulting problem? There are too many cars and not enough parking stalls in the town? Is that what it is?
We have residential parking competing with commercial parking at the peak demand.
Right.
So, because they don't have dedicated parking. That's, I think, kind of it in a nutshell. David, did you want to try to answer the question about, I think we revised these parking standards about 2015. Yeah.
They were higher.
Yeah,
They
before
were
it was
higher.
one space per bedroom.
So they were lowered in 2015.
I think, you know, I'd like to see this too. I think a logical solution, Chris, the one you just proposed, I think is an interesting way. At least there's a logical solution to the problem, potential problem, that we are offering up. And I think that to me is fine. If we can have a logical kind of place so there's got a problem, here's how we're addressing it. Let's go.
Well, so I'm all for compromise and I'm all for trying to get something done. I'm always worried though what that does to the market because that's imposing a financial constraint. Look, this is a building that's going to be very tough to lease, right? It's on a busy road. There's not a lot of uses that are going to go in there. So the existing structure probably, it's sent vacant for a while, although this was going through. It's out of the retail overlay, so it avoids all those issues, right? I mean, I'm willing to agree to that, Chris, but I'm also worried about our unintended consequences. You know how I feel about One Winnetka, right? I know it's unpopular, but the reason why it's still vacant is because we've had lots of issues on it. You know, it's not because, you know, for the record, for the 100 millionth time, the village has approved developments there that just haven't gotten out of the ground because of financing. And maybe other issues too, but.
Yeah, the issues are the idiots that were trying to do the financing.
Well, that too, but my point is I get worried, right? You know, but if that's what gets it approved, that gets it approved. If, you know, but I'd like to hear from the applicant on whether they can agree to that.
I just want to let everybody know, I'm in favor of approving this proposal as is, and I'm okay if the village wants to offer an accommodation should they ever need it in the future.
Go ahead.
Wait.
So if you desire to institute a condition regarding the purchase of village parking passes. The one nuance I would say is I don't know that we'd want to do it by agreement where the village agrees in perpetuity to provide them a parking spot, because village parking lots may change, you may have different needs, and we would want, and I would suggest, keep control of that so we're not tied up in perpetuity. Instead, the typical way to do it would be a condition in the ordinance that would simply state that they would be required to purchase from the village a parking, certain number of parking passes. And then it would be up to the village to decide exactly where those are. And that, so that way we're not bound. The other idea that I've seen, and I'm not advocating one or the other, is where, when they rent out a particular unit and they know how many occupants are there of each unit, they'd be required to share that with that lease with the village, and at which point, based on the number of units or the occupants, you could, now that gets more complicated from an administrative standpoint, but that's been done as well when, so if you have two adults living in the unit, you could see how there may be more need than if there's only one. So there are ways that you can finesse this depending on which direction the council wants to go.
Yeah, I'd be really hard pressed to dump any more on staff with an ongoing thing. So, maybe a parking pass. We don't have a 24/7 parking pass, so, Rob would have to go back and talk with staff and see what kind of numbers they would put on a pass, which might give assurance that at least it's available. And I don't think it would be extraordinary. It's not like you're dropping 50 grand a space.
Well, and that, to your point, to Tina's point, I like making money for the village as much as the next guy or girl. But I don't want to punish them either if they're going to have, if they have, truly one person has one car. I mean, if the need is there should be a fee and there should be a spot. But if there isn't a need, I don't want to punish the residents, the owners either.
I agree with that, like maybe having it available if it's needed. And as Kirk said, I'm in favor of this project. I also don't mind putting something else on it. To reiterate, this is a very unique property. This is not going to come up. This is not like on the tree streets. It's not in a residential area. It's very small and you can't dig down. It's not like these bigger developments that all meet the 1.5 criteria. If it's going to be developed and improved and beautified and not sit vacant, it's probably going to need some kind of allowance. And again, I just don't see where this is our problem, other than other people wanting to do the same thing. But this is, as I said, just so unique and unlikely to be replicated I can't even think of very many spots in town that this could be replicated. And it would be nice if we had something available if they need parking. I also am hesitant about making them have it, and I also wonder whether that's more precedent setting, where someone else would say, oh, we're building this and we just want 15 off-site. So I think we're better off just calling this a really weird property and trying it as is with maybe finding something available and seeing how it works. It's a nice, tight little experiment to see if this kind of housing can work in our village. And like the number one issue that came up with all our planning is we don't have enough different kinds of housing.
I agree with that. What has troubled me with this whole application, though, is what I perceive as a disconnect with the logic to justify the variance. I look at it, it's a very unique piece of property. It's a unique design, it's a beautiful design. And I think we just need to look at it are we okay with 2 parking spaces? And it's up to the renters to find another one. If they need another one, to find a nice person who's got a 3-car garage and rent the third one, a third space or whatever. I guess what's troubled me is this logic that, oh, it's near public transportation and we're gonna charge $5,000 for an apartment, and people who can afford that apartment aren't gonna need 2 cars if they're empty nesters. There's a disconnect. Or if they're a young professional. I don't know a lot of 20-somethings that really want to live in Winnetka and take the train downtown and not have a car. So I feel that conversation is a little bit of the precedent setting that is concerning me not necessarily unique to this property. And I really don't want that conversation to start to take hold as a justification for this kind of thing. I want to look at it as you've described it. It is an experiment. It's a unique property. I just want to look at it that it's 2 spaces and that's it. And that's personally what I'm going to be voting on.
Okay.
And I would support it in that regard. And it's up to the residents or the owners to figure it out.
So Chris, just to
Interesting.
clarify,
No, that's interesting too.
yeah, I support it as is. I get really nervous when we're a collective governmental body kind of deciding kind of what the market is. That makes me nervous. So I'm willing to see how this goes. I think by definition, a walk-up building, my daughter is about to start living in a 5-story walk-up in New York. God willing, I don't die when I move her in. But, you know, there's a market, obviously. This is not New York, I know that. But my point is that, you know, let's see what it is. I can't imagine, you're gonna have the same, this is gonna serve a different housing demographic that we know we need, that's gonna be different than the Muse, just by the fact it's a walk-up. So I'm willing to see where this goes.
Okay, well, we've flipped this burger plenty of times already here, so.
Chris, can I just say one thing?
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say that, when they talked about the forefathers and so on, I think sometimes we have to kind of look ahead, and there is currently, whether we want to admit it or not, there's a parking issue in this town. It comes up all the time, and one of the properties that sits there, that's probably one of the most available someday to develop, and that is the Grand parking lot. That is a privately owned piece of property, and everyone thinks, that Pomeroy spills over there, and Fred spills over there, and everyone else spills over there. Well, that is owned by a family, as we all know, and that may not be there forever. And so to not give full and due review to parking issues that come along today, I think is a mistake. I'll be the lone wolf, I think, on this one, but,
Okay, well, let's see where it goes. How's that? Is anybody willing to make a motion to introduce ordinance number M08-2023?
I move.
Just a point of question. Can we make that motion with these parking spaces?
You can suggest conditions, but then those go to a vote as well.
Okay. I mean, I'm all for this. I really think it's a great thing, but I just want to make sure that it'd be nice to have a home. So when somebody asks us why we did this, it's like we have 3 spaces. I don't want to charge these people unless they're going to use them. So I think they could be available so this is the home.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now you can go ahead and.
Okay. I'm all for this. I want this to go. I do like the idea of having, I know it's not legal precedent, but from a precedent standpoint, that we had given thought to at least making these parking spaces available. I wouldn't necessarily charge these people if they're being used or not. If they're not being used, they shouldn't be charged, in my mind. But if they do have 2 cars, I think they should, it's gonna be, the renter's gonna be upping the pay. The renter who's, has 2 cars will pay for the second car.
how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to
We
monitor?
won't. We're not gonna spend
No,
taxpayer dollars to monitor
No, I
the private
understand that, but
development,
how
for
can
sure.
you monitor if they have 6 cars in the 3 units and they have 2 parking spots? You're saying that they should then go purchase 4 spots in the village lot. But how do you monitor that will happen?
You tow them when they don't.
Okay.
That's pretty much fundamentally how it works,
But they
right?
could-
If you're parked in the wrong spot overnight, if they decide to park right over here
Yeah.
and leave their car there overnight, it won't be there in the morning.
That's true. Where are they gonna park?
Right.
No, we'll tow.
Well, and it's also, there is, think around New Trier. How many people enter into private contracts to park cars on people's driveways?
Okay, well, we don't want more of that.
No, my point is that there's a market for parking, and whether it's a village lot, which would be nice to monetize, although I'm a little bit concerned about making that a condition, or just providing evidence of some other off-site parking.
So Rob, do you have a modification you want to propose to council so we can vote on that?
Yeah, I would propose approving with, and offering up those, up to 3 spots in the village lot and for an additional fee. And if they don't have it, they don't pay. If they're residents with additional cars, it kicks in.
You can weigh in on this, Rob.
Yeah. Thank you. Good point. How do you verify it? How do you administer it without them providing documentation of a lease and what those tenants are needing day in and day out for cars?
I understand.
And how that's gonna change.
But to Chris's point, if they don't do it, I mean, I would.
Trustee Dahlman brought up an interesting point, which
Yeah.
is evidence of a private parking agreement, which you could set at a specific number. So, for example, you're solving for 3 parking spaces, right? You could request 2 or 3 that are privately arranged, and then we get that documentation, and then it should be done. It's a lot easier to administer something like that as opposed to us having to monitor
And I don't want
lease
you
and
to,
renting activity.
last thing I want you to
which-
do is create more work
But that's the
for
only
you.
way for us to verify it.
Yeah.
So
So that means every May and September, or October, which are the traditional moving times, right, for apartments.
Right.
That just sounds like a lot of work for 2
Can-
housing
I think
spaces
that's
for a
so
private
Can-
development.
Can I ask a question? Well, I mean, we don't want to get into the parking lot business in the village, right? Where we're starting to rent out spaces and,
We
Yeah,
do
and
did we
anyway.
do that already? That's
Well, we
something we
rent
did?
them out for commuters and we
For
rent spaces.
commuters, yeah.
Yeah, and there's.
But,
yeah.
you know, the thing that maybe wasn't, we just touched on it, is that they can't take the spots, like they can't be.
Park overnight.
Overnight. So
Overnight
it's
is-
not like they're going, if they have a car, they need to find somewhere to put it. They're,
Right.
you know,
Overnight parking is the bigger concern because you're not allowed
And
to
that's a,
park on the
that's a
street
perfect
overnight.
point, which is I think it's up to us to offer, because we want this to happen, to offer an accommodation, which I think would be nice to do. A service to them.
So just a point of education for the council members. So we have C permits. We have
Commuter permits. Right.
that commuters get. We also have C permits that occupants or tenants of condos or apartments in our business district are also able to secure. So, and they're able to park in certain lots overnight. Those lots are, there's a small portion of the post office lot, the Pine Street lot, and then the station lot over here. In certain times of year, you can even park overnight in the Lincoln Avenue lot. And then there's a rotation schedule for snow, because we have to move the snow out. So when it snows on an odd day, you can't park in certain lots, and when it snows on an even day. So I just wanted those trustees who may not be familiar with the fact that we do currently lease to renters of residential units in our commercial districts, and the limitations they have to work under in order to park in our lots.
And David, this is for the older product that's in town. The older existing product, that's what those
Well, I don't think
spaces are
we've
for.
limited who can
No,
acquire
but that's
those,
primarily-
but that's
that's primarily
primarily
who's
who
using it,
rents
David.
them.
But-
And there are condos, I know in Hubbard Woods in particular, that we have a number of the condo units in Hubbard Woods that lease from the Hubbard Woods lot.
And I think some members in a previous hearing, some residents of the Muse said that they lease for their caregivers over, so.
You know, and if I was renting those out, I would want an option to be able to tell my renters that I have an extra spot that's available to you. It's gonna cost you $100, you know, whatever, it's $10, $100, whatever we're gonna charge a month, versus if we have to say, well, you gotta keep moving your car around, and good luck finding the second spot. I think if I'm renting that, I would want something that type of accommodation that would be much easier for me to rent.
My only concern is, what if you only, what if for, 1 year you have 3 residents in the building? Like, I don't, like, how do you get to the point, to your point, Bob, of making sure that, parking is, taken care of, but not assuming that you're gonna have 6? Maybe there's only 3.
David, is it difficult for someone to get a parking spot if they want, to rent a parking spot if they want one? So in other words, do we need to like lock these 3 up for this building? Or if we just say, no, we're not gonna do that, and as renters come and go, if they need one year, they get one, is it easy enough to?
Yeah, so you have, none of our parking permits guarantees anyone a parking space. Doesn't guarantee a commuter a particular
Oh, I
parking
guess
space.
a parking, I should have rephrased, get a parking permit. Is there a wait
Correct.
list, or is it?
No, there's no wait
Oh.
list.
Okay, so.
That seems easy.
So, yeah, why should we mandate, I guess my thought would, why should we mandate 3 are attached to the building if the market just determines if the people need them, they can,
I
it
didn't know
sounds like
that. I didn't know
relatively
that.
easy
That's
getting
great.
them.
Okay.
Pardon?
Okay, I'm gonna
That's
call the
fine.
question
Yeah.
here. A quick straw poll. Who would be in favor of mandating that the developer / owner of the building purchase parking passes on an ongoing basis to ensure that that's what you're saying, right, Rob?
Well, this may have just changed my mind. If there's truly a way we already have in place that they can rent
When they need it.
when they need it, or if there's somebody's in there, I don't know if it's cost prohibitive that way or what, but.
See what happens when you only have one item on the agenda?
We can beat it to death.
Who knew? I thought.
2 spaces.
I thought we'd be out of here
3.
in 20 minutes, sorry. Yeah.
I think if there's
If there's a mechanism
a
in
mechanism
place.
in place that we just
they can
do it
provide.
as is.
Okay, so it sounds like now we're okay with the mechanism because it's available, and so I'm gonna ask Rob to take a roll call vote.
Okay, so the motion is to introduce as is. The motion
As is?
Yes. Trustee Orsic made the motion, trustee Dahlman seconded. Trustee Orsic,
Yes.
trustee Dahlman,
Yes.
trustee Albinson,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
No.
trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Handler.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. I hope you guys understand what we're worried about, and you're gonna have to be able to navigate this for your customers / tenants. Get them over to Village Hall buying parking passes when the time comes, because the second we hear a complaint from a merchant, and this is a hot button for our merchants in town, the second we hear a complaint from a merchant that a resident of that building is using up valuable shopping parking spaces, they're getting yanked. So, we have to make a hard line on that, because we all hear from the merchants that they all want 50 spaces right in front of their store, which we could never provide anyway. But we have to be sensitive to the fact that they're sensitive.
It's, Chris, sort of relatedly, we left the comp plan discussion with the parking sort of still having a lot of questions surrounding it.
Great.
So, at some point, and this has obviously prompted a lot more, at some point, perhaps we could have a study session on parking and really start to get at it.
In 26 months, you can just beat it to death. Okay, moving along. You're welcome. Oh, I didn't realize that the one Winnetka approval was on for tonight. Oh. Item 9, old business, none. New business, none. Appointments, none. I got a couple meetings next week, so be ready. Closed session, none, and adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned, thank you.